Hey everyone, welcome back. Hopefully this video, the car is up and running. I got a short list. I'll run through them real quick of what I'm trying to accomplish, and then I'll get started and I'll show you a couple of different things, different parts. I know I talked last video at the end that I was going to make a little aluminum shield or thin gauge steel to cover up those wires for the starter relay, battery wire that runs down the K member. So short list here. I got to put the shifter back together on the inside, fill up the oil. I have that small sub box in the rear I got to pull out. I got to pull the back seat, and I got a back seat delete because I carry my race wheels in the back for DragWeek, and I put on street tires. I got to put on a longer clutch cable because of the way the turbo headers are. I still got to wire in a MSD wire to the Mega Squirt, wire in the Y-band 02, plumb in a boost gauge. I have to do the upper plenum and then the last tube that comes out of the intercooler to the intake throttle body. Wire in the fuel pump, power steering fluid, and then I should be able to crank it up. So we'll get started here. I'll show you a couple of things and I hope you guys enjoy. Here's a boost gauge, Innovative Y-band 02. I already have most of it all wired in on a pod. I just gotta put this in. It's not a plug and play necessarily, old school Mega Squirt, but it had an adapter cable at the time that I could have wired in and then plugged in. So it is plug and play, but this is the older version. This is the original one before they made the new one. And I just gotta tie in a couple wires. So then for the lower radiator hose, I bought this really nice kit from Speedway Motors so I can get the lower radiator hose away from this crossover pipe some more. So I'll come out of the radiator down here and then I'll elbow over and I'll go up to the bottom of the water pump. And then here, how I was talking about doing that little shield, but I stopped at a good buddy of mine's house. And I've never seen one of these crazy pieces. Moroso makes it, and it'll literally unbolt the 100 bolt. It'll go down, and it'll cover up a lot of it. And then I'll just probably use a little bit of that metal that I have, and then I'll just piece this over. Excuse me, over that one battery power wire that runs down to the K member, and then that'll fix a lot of the heat issues over there. I know it's big and bulky, but if it keeps all that heat off that wires, it's good for me. And like I said, that list, upper plenum gasket, and then keep on going. I'm gonna have to pull this out a little bit more, open it up a little bit more. But that's it. I like that lower radiator hose kit. It fit real nice. It's away from the power steering, plenty far enough away from the crossover pipe, just to keep all that heat away. Seems good. Here's a little tin piece out of aluminum I made, just to try to keep some extra heat off. And now I'll put this big old girl in the way. Here's it with this big old cover on there. Kind of odd, but hey, if it keeps all that heat away, works in my book. The upper intake's installed. I was missing that center bolt, so I had to use all thread with a nut. And somehow it clears a stock hood when everybody says they don't. I'll keep on going, put the throttle body and spacer on. And then I got to do the intake tube from outside the intercooler that's in the inner fender. Comes off the blow-off valve and it'll go up through that hole. I'll probably have to make it a little larger to fit the one tube. That's how things are shaping up. Throttle body and spacers installed. IAC's plugged in, TPS is plugged in. I do have to extend my IAT sensor because I have it so right before the throttle body I have a bung welded in the inlet tube to get a more accurate reading. So I do have to extend that one sensor. I didn't notice this before, but I got to pull the intake back off. I'm gonna have to shave away a little bit of this intake for my breather fitting to a catch can. It's way too close. And the intake's hitting the valve cover. So I'll shave a little bit of that off as well. Some of the things you have happen when you're using something different. Last time I didn't use this intake, I used the one that was on the other motor that I pulled out of this car when it was turbo on the other car. So learning as I go with this different intake. I've had this thing sitting probably for 15 years and I never used it. So being as I got to pull the intake back off, I'll extend this wire much easier than just trying to sneak it right here. And I always solder all my stuff. So I use shrink tube. The wires I'm messing with, green with a black stripe, black with a white stripe. But I got some purple with a black stripe, and I got green with a white. I'll use my heat shrink. I always solder, and then I'll use a heat gun for the shrink tube, and then I'll just extend it all the way over that way. But I'll leave it long for now until I know exactly how long, and then I'll cut it, and then I'll re-shrink it, solder it that way. Make sure you twist them nice and tight before you solder them. That way the heat shrink slides right over it and then it'll melt perfect. Before I heat shrink, that's what it looks like. I do have flux, but with the smaller wire I didn't really need to use it. It gets both sides. Get your iron pretty warm, and that's about it. Shrink them up, and I'll just tie this back around to where I'm gonna have my new IAT sensor, and then I'll shorten it up when I'm ready to install it. They're all heat shrunk. I'll tape all this back up nice and neat. You'll never know what happened. I'll put this in wire loom as well. This is the intake that I had on my other car when it was turbo. So I just had to grind all this down and then this lip that was hitting the valve cover. So you're never gonna see that. And then this, I tried to smooth it out as best I could. And there's all the shavings. So this is why it had to come off and be shaved down. This isn't only for my breather, for my PCV system, but also this is how I fill the oil. So that's my oil cap essentially. Over here would be a T if I wanted to run on my other car. I run both to one breather, but I'm trying to run two different breathers. But that was just in the way. And I relocated the two relays from the inside of the fender well, snuck it through this back hole here, and then snuck also the O2 sensor harness back through, so that way everything's clean and neat and out of the way of the tire. The new fuel pump relay's wired in, and I tapped in for the signal off of the factory pump. That way they both run at the same time. It's fused here. I have another fuse there. And I just ran it right through the floor. It's hard to see. I had to cut the hole a little bit bigger on the inner fender to get the pipe from the throttle body to come through. And then I just got done cutting this piece that'll come in. There used to be a mass air, but this car uses a map sensor, so that won't take that anymore. And I found out I got a bad throttle body, so I just had to order one right away. That's how it'll fit in there. I'm probably gonna have to trim this just a hair more because you can see where it was rubbing before. That's just touching in here as well. So I'll trim that up once I get the new throttle body, and I know for a fact everything still fits the same. So when I said before that the IAT, the intake air temperature sensor, used to be located right over here on the intake. And then I extended all those wires and I added right here, right before the throttle body, so I can get a true reading because of the turbo adding extra heat to the engine. And then I just gotta solder all this back together, make that nice and neat. And listen to this, this is the throttle body that I caught. That'd have been no good. And this throttle body was on this car with the other engine naturally aspirated. So that's a good catch. Good thing I swapped all this. And then this is, oh, sorry about the shaky. So I might just have to notch it just a little bit more right here. Let's see how well this thing works. You turn the crank and it's supposed to put that bead in there. We'll try this side, see how it does. It actually did a nice job. There's the factory one. There's the one I just made with this thing. I was so worried about the intake hitting the hood, which it doesn't, but the support, I actually had to notch it out, come around. I already gave it a little shot of paint just to clear the intake tube as it comes around. I covered up the motor, try not to get any stuff on there. So I got the new throttle body today, I'll put that on. And then it was just touching, more than just touching, but now it's not gonna touch at all. It clears it. Perfect. I was worried about this big old thing hitting, especially the bolt, but all that clears. Throttle body on. I had to cut this little elbow off. It was coming up too high, and then I just tapped it. 1/8 inch pipe thread. Nice little seal. I'll wrap up with this pipe. When I have this off, I will notch the rest of where I made a mark. That way the pipe doesn't have no rubbish. And so here's the final look of throttle body, intake tube, air. This is how we're looking so far. I got all the vacuum lines ran, plumbed. I got my wideband plug for my wideband O2 sensor that will go right there. And then the other one, this is my O2s. So all the vacuum lines are ran. The Mega Squirt's in. The MSD is always under the passenger seat. That's where I put them. Mega Squirt's tucked up in there. I have cushions around it. This blue wire here, I gotta send that to the wideband. So I got the gauge cluster apart because on the pillar is where I'm gonna put my gauges like I showed you in the other one. That's that Florida 5.0 cluster. Center console's back together. It's easier just to pull the whole bezel. So then I can have cleaner access to wiring these. And like I said, most of the wires already ran and plumbed. I gotta run the boost gauge line through the firewall. But that's how things are shaping up. You sometimes gotta make a mess to make things better. I know everybody likes a first startup. So I still got some things apart that I'll have to put back in, but here goes nothing. She's alive. Wrapping up, making all these breather tanks fit, coolant overflow tank fit. Breathers are mounted. Nice AN lines. Coolant overflow reservoir is done. Now it's finally to the point where I can add water and set the timing and really let this thing warm up. I had everything wrapped up, about to go take it for a test drive, but the upper plenum is still bouncing off the valve cover and made the upper plenum leak. So I got to pull that back off, do some more grinding on that intake. The car's all done, runs great, system's bled, power steering's full. Everything turned out great. Interior's back together. That cord's just for my laptop. I did a backseat delete for HotRod DragWeek. So it's ready to go. So the car's all ready. Tomorrow, leave for HotRod DragWeek. So this was a pretty much turned into a 2-week project between taking a short block, building that, taking a car apart, putting the whole car back together. It's Saturday tomorrow, so we leave for Budds Creek. So thank you everybody for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I appreciate it. See you next time.